Capitalism versus socialism. We can sum up each economic system in one line. Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right? No, wrong, so wrong. It's exactly backwards. And I'll prove it to you. Been on Amazon lately? Each of the thousands of products Amazon offers represents the work of people who believe they have something you want or need. If they're right, they prosper. If they're wrong, they don't. That's how the free market works. It encourages people to improve their lives by satisfying the needs of others. No one starts a business making a thing or providing a service for themselves. They start a business to make things or provide services for others. Now, I speak from personal experience. When I was the CEO of the company that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's restaurant chains, we spent millions of dollars every year trying to determine what customers wanted. If our customers didn't like something, we changed it, and fast. Because if we didn't, our competitors would, pun intended, eat us for lunch. The consumer, that's you, has the ultimate power. In effect, you vote with every dollar you spend. In a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power. It decides what you get from a limited supply it decides should exist. Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it. Not surprisingly, they always get it wrong. Have you ever noticed that late-stage socialist failures always run out of essential items like toilet paper? Of course, this isn't a problem for those who have the right connections with the right people. Those chosen few get whatever they want. But everyone else is out of luck. Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, is the most recent example of socialism driving a prosperous country into an economic ditch. Now, maybe you think it's an unfair example. I'm not sure why, but okay. We'll ignore the fact that leftist activists celebrated it as a great socialist success right up until it wasn't. But what about Western European countries? Don't they have socialist economies? People seem pretty happy there. Why can't we have what they have? Free healthcare, free college, stronger unions. Good question, and the answer may surprise you. There are no socialist countries in Western Europe. Most are just as capitalist as the United States. The only difference, and it's a big one, is that they offer more government benefits than the U.S. does. We can argue about the cost of these benefits and the point at which they reduce individual initiative, thus doing more harm than good. Scandinavians have been debating those questions for years. But only a free market capitalist economy can produce the wealth necessary to sustain all of the supposedly free stuff Europeans enjoy. To get the free stuff, after all, you have to create enough wealth to generate enough tax revenue to pay for everything the government gives away. Without capitalism, you're Venezuela. In a 2015 speech at Harvard, Denmark's prime minister took great pains to make this point. I know that some people in the U.S. associate the Nordic model with socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. So when you point to Denmark as a paragon of socialism, you're really singing the praises of capitalism. The more capitalism, the less socialism you need. Look at America since 2017. A policy of lower taxes and less government regulation, that's more capitalism, has led to a robust economic expansion, something thought impossible just a few years earlier. Unemployment, notably among minority groups typically most at risk for poverty, is at a generational low. Economic expansion gets people off welfare and into work. That's less socialism. None of this requires a degree in economics. Common sense is all you need. That's why it's so frustrating to see young people praising socialism and criticizing capitalism. It's bad enough that they're working against their own interests, better job prospects, better wages, personal freedom. But they're also working against the interest of the less fortunate. Capitalism leads to economic democracy. Socialism leads to the economic dictatorship of the elite. Always and everywhere. So beware what you ask for. You just might get it. I'm Andy Puzder, the author of The Capitalist Comeback for Prager University.
Why is socialism so popular? Less than 10 years ago, you couldn't refer to socialism in a positive way and hope to have a career in American politics. Socialism was referred to as the S word. Now it is affirmed either explicitly or implicitly by just about everyone on the left. And amazingly, given socialism's record of failure, the socialists seem to be gaining ground. Why? What makes socialism so attractive to so many? Socialism, according to its proponents, is more democratic and therefore more moral than capitalism. Leftist filmmaker Michael Moore explains it for us. Democratic socialism means everyone has a seat at the table and everybody gets a slice of the pie. The famed socialist writer Irving Howe wrote something similar in his 1982 autobiography. We believe that the democracy in our political life should also be extended deeply into economic life. The basic idea here is that socialism is vindicated through its roots in popular consent. If a majority of people working through their elected representatives declare something to be a public entitlement, say free college or free health care, then they are justified in extracting resources from those who create wealth to pay for it. As Nathan Robinson argues in his book, Why You Should Be a Socialist, the moral imperative is to place the economy under the control of the people. Sounds good, at least superficially, until you dig a bit below the surface. First, what direct control do the people really have over any government institution? What control do the British people have over the National Health Service? What control do Americans have over the Department of Motor Vehicles or the U.S. Post Office? The answer, of course, is none. Given its practical impossibility, genuine popular control over government institutions is a mirage. Second, what if 51% of Americans vote to confiscate the resources of a single person, say Bill Gates? Does that make it right? Under an authoritarian socialist government, a single dictator seizes the fruits of your labor. Everyone is against that. Under democratic socialism, a majority does. The end result is the same. You've been robbed. The fundamental problem with democratic socialism, however, is its assumption that in a free market system, the economy is not under the control of the people. This is exactly the opposite of how things work. Let me explain. Each of us are not only citizens, we are also consumers. These are overlapping categories. Every citizen is a consumer, and every consumer is also a citizen. The consumer, like the citizen, is a voter. As citizens, we vote once every 2 or 4 years. As consumers, we vote many times a day. The citizen votes with a ballot, which costs him nothing except the inconvenience of going to the polls. The consumer votes with his money, which costs him a lot, all the time and effort he put in to earn that money. Only a fraction of citizens are eligible to vote at the ballot box, but every consumer votes in the marketplace, even felons, even children. Illegal aliens cannot vote for political candidates, but they too vote with their money. Moreover, citizens participate in a system of representative democracy. Their views are filtered through the politicians who represent them. Consumers, by contrast, vote in a system of direct democracy. If you prefer an Audi to a Lexus or the Apple iPhone to the Samsung Galaxy, you don't have to elect some other guy to exercise these preferences. You do it directly yourself by paying for them. Here we see the secret of how those billionaires like Jeff Bezos got so rich. We made them rich. The inequality that socialists complain about is the result of popular mandate. Want fewer billionaires? Stop buying their stuff. Free markets work not through greed or exploitation, but by satisfying our wants. And the most successful entrepreneurs are those who anticipate our wants even before we have them. No one wrote Steve Jobs asking him to make a phone that took pictures, allowed people to text messages, and listen to music. He conceived it and built it before we knew we couldn't live without it. Market economies involve a level of popular participation and democratic consent that politics can only envy. We don't need to extend democracy from the political to the economic sphere. We already have it. And the moral grounding of free markets, just like that of our political system, is in the will of the people. In the latter case, a will expressed only on election day. In the former case, a will expressed deliberately, emphatically, constantly. We don't need socialism because we already have something more moral and more democratic. It's called capitalism. I'm Dinesh D'Souza for Prager University.
There are many in the West, including many who should know better, who find it difficult, unpopular, or just plain embarrassing to defend capitalism. I take the opposite view. We should double down on it, for a very simple reason. It remains not just the best, but the only chance for the least fortunate in the world to make life better for themselves and their children. And the more we see of capitalism's rival, socialism, the more proof we have that capitalism is the way we want to go. I've seen this over and over again, from my own childhood to my time as governor of South Carolina to most recently and most dramatically during my tenure as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. I grew up in South Carolina as the daughter of Indian immigrants. My mom started a small shop selling clothes and gifts that grew into a successful business. She showed my brothers, my sister, and me what it meant to live the American dream. As my mother's story so vividly illustrates, America is a country where people can find jobs that match their talents and passions. Some Americans take this for granted. The rest of the world envies it. As governor of South Carolina, I marveled at capitalism's power to improve lives. Our pro-free market policies helped bring in more than $20 billion in investment and created jobs in every county of the state. Those jobs provide dignity and purpose. And as I often say, when you give a person a job, you take care of a family. During my time as the U.S. ambassador to the UN, I was reminded that not every country enjoys the same freedom and prosperity as America. More than 1.5 billion people still suffer under socialist regimes. In 2018, I stood on the Simon Bolivar Bridge at the border of Venezuela and Colombia. I watched thousands of Venezuelans cross into Colombia for the only meal they might have that day. I held a beautiful baby girl. Her mother told me all she wanted for her daughter was a future of freedom. They were one of millions of Venezuelan families whose lives have been destroyed by the country's socialist policies. So imagine my dismay to find that socialism has become trendy here in America. American socialists claim they seek a more enlightened socialism, like those found in Scandinavian countries. But those countries are not socialist. They're capitalist and offer large welfare benefits. But ironically, to make their system work, they've had to repeatedly slash their corporate tax rates. Denmark has cut its corporate rate by more than half since the 1990s. Other democracies, including Israel, India, and the UK, experimented with socialism, only to abandon it, and only then did they thrive. The results are in. Socialism, however you want to define it, has failed everywhere it's been tried. A handful of elites sitting in a government office can never outthink millions of business owners and consumers making millions of individual choices every moment of every day. You'd think we'd have gotten the message by now. An entire generation of American adults are too young to remember the suffering socialism caused during the last century. Instead of teaching students to reject our country's history and founding ideals, schools should have a required class on the history and collapse of the Soviet Union. Young people at least have the excuse of being miseducated. But what does one say about corporate CEOs who give in to social trends rather than standing up for a system that their own businesses and workers depend on? I'm talking about advocates of so-called stakeholder capitalism, a philosophy that retains the word capitalism but abandons its meaning. Recently, the chief executives of some of America's largest companies changed their self-definition. They said companies should focus on customers, workers, and communities. This is just politically correct nonsense. These CEOs know that's what successful businesses already do. It's what they have to do to survive in our capitalist system. A company that cheats its customers, mistreats its workers, and abuses its community won't be around long. Profits are what keep a business going and allow it to thrive. They generate the funds needed for more job creation. You don't need an advanced economics degree to understand this. So why are these CEOs so anxious to embrace this in-name-only capitalism? Probably because they think they need to placate the noisemakers on the socialist left. But that's a fool's game. The left is never satisfied. So let's defend what works, and what works is capitalism. Until the unforeseeable shutdown of the economy as a response to the coronavirus, it was working better than ever. Unemployment was at a 50-year low. Wages were rising at the fastest rate in a decade. More women and minorities were working than ever before. Poverty was at a record low in America. Let's get back to that as quickly as possible. There's only one way to do it: capitalism. I'm Nikki Haley for Prager University.
You love capitalism. Really, you do. And you can't stand big government. Really, you can't. Don't believe me? Then I'll just have to prove it to you. Do you use an iPhone, Android, MacBook, PC? Read on a Kindle? Watch TV and movies on Netflix? Videos on YouTube? Shop on Amazon? Listen to Spotify? Search on Google? Send money on Venmo? Grab a ride with Uber? Drive with Waze? Book a room with Airbnb? Are you on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat? You probably use many, if not all of these things. And if you're like me, you love them. In today's world, they're practically necessities. Where do you think they came from? From entrepreneurs with great ideas and the freedom to test them in the marketplace. That is what is known as capitalism. Now consider some other things you probably use. Have you been to the DMV? Gone through airport security? Mailed a package at the post office? Called the IRS customer service line? Or called any government office for that matter? What's different? Why is going to the Apple Store so fun, but going to the DMV so painful? Because one has nothing to do with government, and one is the government. One needs to satisfy its customers to survive and grow. One doesn't. The purpose of government is not to create products, and we don't expect it to. But if you thought about it for a few moments, you'd realize you don't want the government involved in just about anything private business can do. That's because profit-motivated individuals have to work to please their customers. You, government agencies, don't have to please anyone. Call that IRS service line if you doubt me. Can you imagine if Steve Jobs had to seek government approval for every new design of the iPhone? We'd have been lucky to get to the iPhone 3G. Look at Uber. Just a few years ago, summoning a private driver in a few minutes who would take you where you wanted to go was truly a service available only to the wealthiest people. But now, thanks to capitalism, private rides are an affordable option for ordinary people all over the world. Until Uber came around, if it started to rain in, say, Manhattan, and you wanted to grab a cab, good luck. Too many rain-drenched people and too few cabs. Uber had a better idea. Rain falls, demand for rides spikes. Raise prices to incentivize more Uber drivers to hit the road. Ride in the rain problem solved. Airbnb is another example. Only a few years ago, if you were going on vacation with your friends or family, hotels were just about your only option. But hotels are expensive and often don't provide all that much in terms of space, amenities, or interesting neighborhoods. If you wanted to, say, find out if individual homeowners were making their homes or apartments available for a few nights, you'd have to scour internet postings. But then Airbnb came along, giving anyone with a computer or smartphone access to over 2 million homes in 190 countries. You can find places with hot tubs and pools, or if you're on a tighter budget, you can rent a room, or even just a couch. Government never could have done this. What motivation would it have? How would it even know we wanted services like Uber or Airbnb? We didn't know it until risk-taking entrepreneurs made it possible. Thanks to capitalism. And no thanks to government, which more often than not just gets in the way. Why? Because the government's knee-jerk reaction is to regulate and control everything it can regulate and control. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of many government agencies and all those bureaucrats? Cities across the world are putting up barriers to slow down or shut down services like Uber and Airbnb. Rulemaking may be the only area where the government shows creativity. Economic growth has the best chance of happening in the absence of that rulemaking. As economist Adam Thayer explains, the internet, to use just one important example, was able to develop in a regulatory climate that embraced what he calls permissionless innovation. This approach to regulating allows entrepreneurs to meet their customers' needs without first seeking government approval. In sum, almost everything you enjoy using is a product of capitalism. Almost everything you can't stand is a product of big government. So do you love capitalism? Of course you do. You practice it every day. It's time to preach it. I'm Jared Meyer of the Manhattan Institute for Prager University.